Governance is defined as the manner and act of administering a space. This could be a society, a company, or even a household. And every country around the world has maintained governments till date and will most likely continue to, because the challenge of governance and administration can never expire. I sometimes imagine the art and science of ensuring that 7.5 billion people on Earth wake up daily and have food to eat, at least in the most, transport to get around, and fulfillment for their earthly needs, including emotional ones. It is a great task indeed for one to aspire to administer disparate millions of people from different backgrounds, with different intents, interests, objectives, temperaments, moralities, and ambitions. Some pundits over time have tried to minimize the import of government and governance, preferring instead that most of society should self-administer and self-regulate. It often looks very enlightened in textbooks, but without governance and administration, it is very likely that society as well as markets will rapidly descend into primitive chaos. But why is governance such a challenge in Nigeria and Black Africa at large? Why do we have the worst indices in terms of hunger, illiteracy, out-of-school children, unemployment, and many other indices that indicate that things are not going right? Beyond the politics of the day, this is worrisome, and it is a matter that needs to be intellectualized, because beyond the humdrum and chaos associated with politics is most likely destructive when what we should spend more time doing is pondering for long about a difficult problem and therefore proffering solutions that can make it into bodies of knowledge targeted specifically at our society. Joining us to discuss this today on this highly intellectual topic is Mr. Dayo Omogun, a publisher, communications and governance expert. Welcome to The Nationalist.
Thank you, Dr. Fasho.
Thank you very much for coming and for acceding to our request for you to show on the program, The Nationalist.
The pleasure really is mine.
Thank you very much. So, what's your position on that theory of self-regulation? No need for government. Let everybody do whatever it is they want. Let markets be free. Let markets self-regulate. Because I think there's this group of people, and they get quite a bit of attention these days, and it keys into an aspect of liberalism, who believe that minimal governance is what's required. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we must have some measure of government and governance, because the only other alternative is that we'll descend into the Hobbesian state. If you take away so much governance, in actual fact, with government right in place, you and I know the challenges that we still face. You and I know that there are still a lot of leakages, a lot of errors, a lot of challenges. And so now, if the more that you clamp down on government, the more you're going to have a lot of lawlessness, you're going to have a lot of irregularities, the very things that those who champion self-regulation think that freedom or a lot more liberalism will help to take care of. The truth is that too much freedoms will always lead to crisis. There's no doubt about it. And if I agree that bad governance is as good as no governance, because the essence of having governance is to be able to, what does the world define as good governance? For example, you have to have elements of participation, consensus, you have to have equity, you have to have openness or transparency, you have to have accountability and all that. And once it's not there, what you're going to have is bad governance, which in some other way can be referred to as no governance.
But it seems like people are reacting to the fact that, like in Nigeria here specifically, oftentimes government constitutes itself into impediments for business. Those who work in those sectors of government, sometimes they exploit the people who are trying to do business, or they make themselves into the problem rather than the solution. Don't you see that?
Yes, I agree that to a large extent, government's services, government systems are not efficient enough. They're not hassle-free. It ought to be a lot more seamless. I mean, let me give you an example. This government, for example, prides itself as doing well in terms of ease of doing business. But the greatest ease that any business person needs is to be able to get his money when services have been rendered. But we have a situation where the same government that wants to make a song and dance of doing business, making business easy, facilitating business, is the same government that owes businessmen contractors for 1, 2, 3 years. So, yes, they may have registered their companies in a jiffy. They may have been able to do their tax clearance very easily. But at the end, what matters most at the end for the businessman, for his household, for several persons who depend on him, for several other stakeholders around him, and indeed for the larger society, is the fact that he gets paid for his services. And this is not in place in many cases. So that also, it trickles down to several other spaces. That's why you can find businesses who don't pay their workers, and so on and so forth and so forth. The effect is massive. I agree. But you see, if you also take away the part that they do right now, you will fill the land with fraudsters. You will fill the land with dodgers. You'll fill the land with people who already that was what they were looking for, so you make a gateway for them. It's a good thing that we can cramp up the space for people who are naturally or who have a tendency to shortcut the system, to short circuit the system. There are people who are just bent that way. So government has to be in place to put rules and regulations in place to do this. But it must be in place. These regulations must not become an albatross. That's the balance. That's the balance that government must strike.
Thank you very much for that. You made a very, very valid point. If we go back to what you mentioned about, ease of doing business, yes. And I wanted to point out that I think maybe the problem is that the ease of doing business metrics that the government is working with now, which is something that was handed down by World Bank. I personally critiqued it, and my position was that, look, this is not measuring the ease of Nigerian companies doing business
at all.
And so I drew up my own metrics.
Okay.
So they had 10 points, and you'll be shocked. Some of the points that the World Bank is measuring is ease of paying taxes.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, how does that, you're supposed to do business, make profit before you pay taxes.
Exactly.
Ease of declaring bankruptcy.
Okay.
So why are you measuring the ease of declaring bankruptcy? That's not our thing here. You can see that's an American thing. Like Donald Trump declared bankruptcy 4 times, he still became president of America. Here we don't think in terms of bankruptcy. We're thinking, look, do the business first. So other things like ease of cross-border trade. It's not everybody that wants to take things
international
across.
Business. Exactly.
Ease of construction permit. It's not every business that wants to construct. I'm talking of that's 4
already
out of 10. When I looked at about 6 out of 10, I realized that no, this is not for us. And you'll be shocked. One of the things you mentioned, and you can find my article on Premium Time, was what you just mentioned.
Exactly.
When someone does business, how quickly do you get paid?
Does it get paid?
Because it actually affects the sustainability of the business. And a lot of people have been owed 6 years. And God help you, whether at the state level, federal level, with the government that owes you, they go. And even if it's the same party that comes, forget that
Your
money.
fate is in the balance.
So that's a very, very important point you just made.
It's a very terrible thing.
Yeah, and so we're hoping that the government, those in charge, they take note. Yeah, exactly. I actually suggested to them that they should also, if necessary, why don't we have our own small index, a Nigerian index that
by which we measure.
Yeah. But usually the problem, I know how much those foreign bodies can bully those in government. Yeah. So you can't actually show that you have your own ideas. And all of that stuff, So, but beyond that, let's further intellectualize it, So what would you say, looking from a perspective of governance, as it is, as it should be, what are those challenges that we could say, not quite peculiar, but that for Nigeria, but maybe Nigeria and Africa. Why, if you were in government today, what are the real challenges that we need to deal with at an intellectual, level?
Now, if we're talking about governance, government, we must be talking about democracy right now, because that's what we operate. And I think that one of the greatest challenges to our democratic experience is impunity. Impunity and lack of respect for the rule of law. As long as this operates, and you see, it's like a culture here in Nigeria or Africa. It starts from the home. The head of the house hardly listens to, in many cases, well, it's changing now.
Yeah, it's changing,
but
hopefully.
if you look back, you would find out that once the man spoke, nobody, I mean, no other voice is heard. Whether those ideas were right, whether they were going to be beneficial, whether they were the best in the circumstance, it didn't matter. The father had spoken. Now, you take it to the traditional setting. For ages, any monarch who sits on the throne, once he makes a pronouncement, it's done.
The Kabiyesi culture.
Kabiyesi is done. And so that also has transcended all those ages into our modern state.
Governance.
Now, even in the churches, I've listened to messages where somebody preaches and says, God is not a Democrat.
Wow.
Now, we forget that, yes, that is true. God does not have to consult anybody. But that's God.
Yeah.
He is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. If we all have the same belief, then you cannot compare man. You cannot use that as the standard for man. You are still a man. Every man, no matter who it is, an inventor, philanthropist, pastor, preacher, whatever, is still a man at his very best. He still has weaknesses, he still has biases, he still has prejudices, he still has some things, secrets he's struggling with. So you cannot be man. So, but the truth is that these things predate even our democratic experience. And so until these are taken out of our system, we're going to have serious challenges. That's number one. Number two, we have a high level of literacy and ignorance. A lot of people don't even know what their rights are. So what you do not know, you cannot lay claim to. And so that's a serious problem on its own. Now, again, you'll find out that we have a very bad justice system. Very, very bad justice system. Where, I was reading something, and I think the person was even replying to, I think there was a post somewhere. And then the man said, and I remember the man specifically, I don't know whether it's necessary to mention his name, but he said justice in Nigeria, or in many societies, is like the cobwebs that catch insects, but big animals, they squeeze their way through. They just bulldoze their way through. So Nigeria, that's exactly the scenario, even in many African countries. So that on its own is a real challenge. It makes we don't have a level playing field. So, and some people could get away with whatever, and then,
but that also then dovetails down the line, like you said, because if for example you say, okay, let everybody join the queue, but maybe in the airport, and then one big man is coming, all the policemen are rushing to pick him and bring him. So the next person decides that, look,
what's the point? Exactly. So what's the point? So, but at the same time, we must take these items and many others. I'm sure that we would have some other time to be able to delve into a whole lot of details. But the truth for now is that these three at least must be dealt with. Once literacy levels,
so illiteracy,
and then impunity is taken away, and then the justice system is equitable.
Rule of law.
Yes, and there's rule of law. I can assure you that we'll have a better governance environment. Yes,
and that illiteracy is also illiteracy, impunity, rule of law. Rule of law and impunity seem to move together.
They are together.
But that's very, very important. That we used to have a government that actually prides itself as a rule of law, as the Yaradua government, but they didn't stay long enough, unfortunately. It's okay. That's something to look at. Impunity, very important. Is basically something like, what Yorubas would say, Tani Omumi, who can stop me, do it.
Exactly.
And you see Abuja, I look at Abuja very, very, very sadly. You see that those are traffic lights. Is these taxi drivers that breach it the most. They don't care anymore.
Do you notice that whereas in many other parts of Nigeria, it's bad roads that cause accidents. In Abuja, it's the good roads that cause accidents. You know why? Because the roads are so good, people feel that even the traffic lights are an encumbrance. And then so once the road seems free on
Yes.
the other side, not minding, not taking into cognizance the fact that there's a possibility that
somebody else
are
is
coming
coming.
from. Once they look at the other part and there's no, they just feel that,
Just
look,
go.
this is a waste of time.
So,
Why should I be waiting for
it's just sad
a machine?
that you know, in a place, a federal capital built from the scratch.
Exactly.
I mean, there'll be total recklessness, impunity,
Serious case of
indiscipline,
recklessness,
and
I
all
tell
of
you.
that. I mean, to the extent that, I mean, and in fact, the other day around Area 11 near FCDA, I was coming, of course, I was on my right, no problem, but the policemen and co had stopped one guy in a Mercedes-Benz. But behind him, and also, in fact, the real culprit was a taxi guy, and they let him go. They didn't even stop him. So I got there, I said, why? Because you can collect some money from this guy.
That's it.
But you see, so I think also it's important for people to do their job and do their job well. And I think that also maybe our governance people are missing out on what they call MBWA, management by walking about, you know,
yeah,
ensuring you don't see things
Yes,
yourself.
they don't see things
That
for
in
themselves.
federal secretariat here, you know, where you're trying to turn into federal secretariat,
Yeah.
there was one day a truck was going and they poured something like concrete on the road. As I'm talking to you, that concrete
It's
is
still
still
there.
I mean, it's a long time. It has joined with the tar a while ago. So, I mean, what could, in other places, under 24 hours,
Something will be done about
somebody
it.
will come and, I'm talking of concrete, you know, which spread a bit all over the place.
Remember that in the Obasanjo regime, there was something called Savicom.
Yes.
Now look at it. Look at it. As basic as responding to proposals, responding to mails, is not done here. You do a proposal, you have to follow it all through
you have to follow
till
your
it
proposal.
delivers. I mean, nobody calls you and says, "Oh, we've received your proposal.
Yeah.
It's receiving attention." Nobody does it.
I think one or two, only a few organizations
Very
have
few.
that. Yeah.
I think,
And oftentimes, even those letters, they give people like us heartache because you can be sure
that
that
when it's not,
you
then
get
it's a
that
negative.
that's the end of your proposal.
Exactly.
You know.
So
You know.
these are the
Yeah.
little things that ordinarily.
But that's very important. Now, you know, illiteracy, impunity, rule of law. And I've also added MBWA.
Yes,
For some
management by
reason,
walking
I mean, we're here,
about.
you'll see a crater starts to form, and you know,
it will-
nobody until it becomes a huge,
exactly.
you know, a small pothole becomes a crater,
crater.
becomes a canyon.
Canyon. Yeah.
You know, and nobody until the president and co, everybody will now come and do a big. Anyhow, please hold your thoughts. You know, we're going to take a short break. You've been watching the Nationalist, your program. We're discussing some very important issues on governance. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Nationalist, and we're discussing on governance issue today with Mr. Tayo Omogun. So before we left, you were discussing, you know, I wanted to point to the, you mentioned illiteracy as one of the problems, and I think that's something that we need to expatiate on. It's very, very important because I have this theory that if we can have an emergency against illiteracy in this country at a very low level, if we can ensure that 90% of our children are trained between ages of 3 when they start to go to school to 9, and for the next 6 years, this country will transform. Because we're going to have a new breed of human beings who can plug into society. And I think it also dovetails to what you're saying, because we get that level of literacy, you tend to understand why society should be in a certain order.
certain way.
Yeah,
exactly.
you know.
I mean, we're all aware of the figures being churned out about out of school children.
Yeah,
The last I
unfortunately.
heard is about 20 million.
20 million. And in
That's-
fact, they said Nigeria has 20%
Of the
all the world's out of school.
20%. That is
It's terrible.
1/5.
It's terrible.
That's a very terrible thing. It's very scary, and it shows you. It tells why we are where we are. I mean, how can you have 20 million children out of school,
According
of school
to
age?
UNESCO, yeah.
Exactly, of school age.
But the other
out
time,
of
I
school.
also heard the governor of Kano State, Governor Ganduje, saying that Kano alone has 3 million. That's some years back, and but most of them came in from Niger and Chad and northern Cameroon.
No, I
So
think
I
that
think we have to be
no,
careful,
I
too.
think that we can't really go by that, because then you need to do the entire shuffling, because there will also be Kano people who are in other states
other
and everything,
states, exactly.
and probably in those
Maybe
Nigeria
that
and
was just
everything.
an escapist,
That's what I'm saying. So if we need to tackle a problem, let's not begin
But
to.
I'm also afraid
dance
about
around about it.
yeah,
about
but I'm always afraid about the flux, and just 2 weeks ago, the Chief of Defense Staff, that's General Leo Irabo,
Yeah.
said that Nigeria has 137 unmanned borders.
137. No, I mean, see, I think that our
Also a
takeaway-
governance issue.
Yeah, I
if
think
you cannot
I think-
police your country, that's a
I
governance
think
issue.
our takeaway should be that when all these figures are being bandied around, you can take a middle position. We can say, okay, 15 million. But 15 million is
Yeah.
still not.
It's still not
It's not
acceptable
exactly
and not a good thing.
So
nothing to
if
cheer
you're
about.
talking about 137 border positions, you can crash it to 100. It's still a bad situation.
a bad situation,
So
yeah.
we need to get to the point where, like you said, if the foundation can be laid, even if you don't put so much on top of
Exactly,
it,
yeah.
once you have a good foundation, people can read and write.
And for me,
Let me share with you
Yeah.
something, an experience I had long ago. I used to work with a company. In fact, that's the company that brought me to Abuja for the very first time. We were housed in one of their delicate buildings on Oregon Road. I've forgotten the particular bus stop now. One of the branch of his bank, when they still had a bank, was in that building, and our office was also there. And then one of these days, we went out for lunch, and we used to go eat around John Holt.
Okay.
There's a back place at the back of John Holt where we went to eat. And then one day, as I was standing right there, somebody walks up to me and he says, "Oh, please, sir, sir, John Holt ni mo wa."
Okay.
He was standing right in front of John Holt. The signpost of John Holt was standing and facing him directly.
Yeah.
And then he was asking me. It touched me in a very bad way. Because what it meant is that if you're not educated, you are not better than the blind.
Oh.
If you cannot read and write, and I'm not talking about all kinds of certificates, basically, if you cannot read and write, the difference between you and the person who is blind is minimal. There's really no difference, because the person who is blind will also ask that same question that man came to ask. He was standing right in front of him, but those things didn't mean anything to him. It's very sad.
And
I never
was
ever
going to
forget.
say that I also see that illiteracy problem and out-of-school children issue we have in Nigeria as an opportunity, because I think that what countries do is they rally around their problem. For example, like the world just got out of this COVID thing, whatever it is you believe about it, a terrible experience. But you could see how much resources those countries moved around it because they were scared. But even up till now, the number of jobs they created from just COVID, those who will visit people at home, those who will man this one, those who will do this one, those who will keep the record, those who... In the UK alone, millions of jobs were generated around COVID.
Yeah, but you're not going to expect that from the world.
So why can't we do that, the same thing? No, I'm not from the world.
Okay, for
Nigeria doing the
ourselves.
same thing around the out-of-school children, jobs for teachers, for social workers, construction jobs for new schools, and what have you.
I think that we should go
Why are we not
back
seeing that
a
way?
little bit back in time. During the Jonathan administration, we had a program, Almajiri schools. That government was caring to the point where they felt that, please, let's do something about these children on the streets. And they built schools.
It gets very political very quickly.
Exactly. But because, I think that a lot of times we must have the clear, a clarity of vision, a clarity of mind to know where politics starts and where governance starts. We must make a clear distinction between the two. Because if we politicize everything, we will lose out. And that's what we are.
So let me take you back to the intellectual angle. There's always this the dichotomy between leadership and management. And what I noticed of recent was that everybody is studying to be a leader. Everybody wants to be a leader. Nobody wants to be a manager. We're beginning to look down on management as if, it's just... everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody wants to be a big man. But are you sure that many of the problems we have in this country with the governance issue are not management problems? For example, don't dump things here. Is there someone enforcing that it's not
enforcement,
dumped?
exactly.
When it's dumped, is there someone there to catch whoever is doing it? Those are management. You
That's
don't need
true.
to be a fantastic leader to
come and now ensure that is
these
done.
things I'm mentioning about small potholes becoming big craters. Management issue. You don't have to be a
Exactly.
big leader to do.
Exactly.
So are you sure we're not
I
missing
think-
out
I think-
on the
I
challenge
think
of
that-
management itself?
I think that, you see, we're people who love big titles and offices.
Exactly. That's
And
the
you
psychology
see,
there.
There's no, I mean, titles don't, for me, titles don't really matter. I know certain position I had to quit when I felt that it wasn't, I mean, I didn't see myself being allowed to play the role. Because you see, the role is more important than the robe. The role.
There's a book by Robin Sharma or Z. Simon Sinek, The Leader Without a Title. Maybe
Good.
that's what you're talking about.
Maybe I need to go read such a thing. It falls, I mean, it resonates well with how I feel. Now, so we like big titles, we like big positions, but we don't know that position comes with responsibility. Every position where the responsibility is not being discharged, I mean, it's a waste. Now, we need to understand, you know, a lot of cases, if you sit back and look, even the 1999 Constitution that we have tried to say, oh, is the most demonic construction in the world.
I don't particularly agree with that.
Exactly.
There are no
It's
perfect
not true.
constitutions
There's no perfect anything anywhere.
Yes.
So it's working it out that is the problem. Just like you have pointed out, management. A lot of times, we need to emphasize management. We need to, the dreamers, a lot of times, they have fantastic dreams. The visions are great. Our founding fathers in Nigeria had wonderful vision. But how much of that has been put into practice in the proper way? That's the challenge that we have. That's the challenge that we have. I mean, when everybody begins to think in terms of what will come to me, then we have a serious problem.
Exactly.
Because that's the reason why those things happen. Somebody is assigned to make sure, oh, there's no dump site here. He comes there, he finds you dumping something, and he looks at it. Well, you have dumped it. You have a choice in this matter. You could go in for it, or we could talk business. Yeah.
Exactly. And from that point on, everything breaks down.
Lost.
Wow, thank you very much, Mr. Mogun. My producer is telling me that we've done our time. It's been great speaking to you. And look, I couldn't get through half of the questions
that you prepared.
So that means that maybe in a couple of weeks' time, we have to bring you back.
No problem.
So it's been great talking to you.
No
Thank you
problem. For the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. God bless you. Thank you for listening. And it's been the Nationalist. We hope that you had a great time listening to us today. See you next week.